Hello and welcome to the podcast. Today I have with me Joe Jordan from Ciro or Ciro.ai, depending on how you want to say it. Joe's been with me. What is this? The third time you've been with me, Joe?
Yeah, third time's a charm.
Third time's a charm. So if you want to go back, I'll put in the show notes some of the previous times Joe's been on this. The first time he was on, it was just sort of an overview of here's what Ciro is, here's what Ciro does, and we'll review that just a little bit for those of you who were not there. But you can go get the full episode. The second time he came on, we went through some examples and looked at how the program actually works. Today we're going to talk more about getting in the weeds for sales coaching, talking about how sales coaching hasn't really caught up to the AI world that we live in right now. And with that introduction, Joe, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so let's do this. Let's just give a quick review of who you are and what you're all about. Tell us just briefly, Ciro, uh, where you came from, how this came about.
Yeah, totally. So Zero is a tool that records, transcribes, and analyzes field in-person conversations. So you can have full visibility and accountability into what's actually happening. So I come from field sales. I was a number two rep in my office at Cutco during a summer in college. Then I was one of the top managers in the nation. And what I really found was like I wasn't able to help anyone replicate the kind of results I had as an individual sales rep when I became a manager. And even though the numbers said we did well, like I really wasn't happy that I couldn't help a lot of people reach their potential. They just weren't selling as much as they should have been able to. So I wanted to build a platform that could allow me to coach people to the results I thought they were capable of by like shrinking down the amount of time it took to actually coach them from hours driving around in the field to maybe 5 minutes doing a shadow or a ride along virtually.
Okay, so I'm going to give what I consider to be an accurate description of Zero, what it does, and you're going to give me feedback for my audience to make sure I got it right. So this is a tool that you put on your phone. Your sales reps will put it on their phone. It's going to record the conversations that your sales reps are having in the home with their prospects and hopefully subsequently their customers. And it's going to use an AI engine to analyze what's being said, to give data to you as a sales leader about how they're performing. For instance, things like what percentage of the time is spent with your rep talking versus a customer talking, how many questions they ask, what kinds of questions they ask. If you've got a sales methodology, let's say you use a 10-step process, are they actually using the process appropriately? And then not only is it going to analyze that and give feedback to you as a sales leader, it's actually going to then aggregate. And this is really, really cool. And I think it's ahead of some of the other similar kinds of products out there. It's going to aggregate clips from within your team, identify where a given sales rep is weak, aggregate clips of other sales reps who are good and better at that, and it's going to feed them to them in like a real-time stream so that they can get daily coaching on the specific things that they need to be improving upon. I know I'm doing the program in whole a disservice with that description, but I think that covers like a lot of the major bullet points.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Look, you record the conversations, and the AI engine is going to analyze all sorts of things: adherence to process, speech analytics, like whether you're talking too much, whether you're asking enough questions, whether you're listening intently, whether you're controlling the conversation, and then grade all of these things so that you can do a ride along in seconds versus hours. You have full visibility into your team on a day-to-day basis and week-to-week basis. So you know exactly what to coach on when you get into team meetings and why people aren't doing well, and then to actually go ahead and improve the results once you know where you need to improve. It's actually automatically going to be surfacing the best in class examples from all your top reps, surfacing them to you, and even surfacing them directly to reps. And that's one of the biggest differences between Zero and like other players in the space. And it's one of the reasons that people on Zero record for themselves, whereas people on other platforms really feel like they're recording for their manager.
Yeah, yeah, I love this program. That's why I've had you on multiple times. I can't give my audience enough exposure to this. But today we want to dig a little bit deeper I told Joe this, and I have some other recurring guests. If you, audience member, notice that I'm having the same people on every 2 or 3 or 4 months, it's because not only they have a great product, which in this case is true, but also is what I consider to be a thought leader in topics that are relevant to you, whether that be sales leadership in this case, also AI in this case, also sales technology in this case. I just think it's important to continue to put people like Joe in front of you and have conversations that are going to benefit you. So that's what we're going to do here. Let's go ahead and transition on that note then. Let's talk about sales processes and something you said to me that I thought was interesting. I want you to dive into it. You said something like, I don't know if I'm saying this exactly right, but a sales team's obsession with process holds the team back. So let's use that as kind of a starting point. Tell me what you mean by that and let's dive into it.
Yeah. And it might make sense actually to zoom out for a second and talk a little bit about like coaching in general.
Okay.
Um, I think one of the things that's obvious is that without a tool like this, coaching is really, really costly. To go out into the field, to watch a rep, maybe do an appointment for and 90 minutes, 2 hours, and then drive all the way back. Like you're talking about spending hours in the field just for one rep. It takes a ton of time. You can't scale it. And reps are doing different things when you're there anyway, right? So very, very costly. So it doesn't happen often. Like what we've seen is like on average, reps are actually coached on what they're actually doing, um, like way less than once a month, and about half are not coached at all. So really, it only happens when someone is really struggling, like you're seeing them do a ton of no sales, and the situation's already on fire, or if like they're brand new, and then once they're through their training period, they're sort of on totally on their own. And that made sense in a world where coaching was so costly. You just couldn't do it more often. Um, what
So
we
in that world, is it probably true then that the coaching is geared towards the group? In other words, here's our methodology. I'm going to train you on the methodology. We're going to give you reps on the methodology. But if you're actually executing against our methodology in the home, we don't really know. And when we try to find out, it's very costly and it's not all that accurate. So we'll just continue to train on our methodology. Here's our 10 steps. Today we're going to cover step 4. Let's go.
Exactly. And even that we would call actually training, not coaching, where training is you just teach someone a skill. It's more like a classroom style, it's educational, whereas coaching is very personalized to something very specific that an individual is struggling with and that you've determined actually is a big blocker to them advancing to their next breakthrough.
Here, I'll give you the analogy that I just thought up.
Yeah.
I love sports, basketball, football, baseball, whatever. But let's say it's basketball. And so you practice plays in practice. So this is our methodology. Okay, we're going to run these plays. Or football would be the same because you're running plays. So in practice, you're going to do reps on these plays, reps on these plays, reps on these plays. Here's how you do it. You guys move this way, you go here, then the shot goes up from here, and you rep it out and you get really, really good at it in practice. Problem is, in practice, you're practicing against other people who also know what the play is because they're also in the practice.
Yes.
Then traditional sales training, not coaching, to use your distinction from just a minute ago, would be like, okay, then they went and played the game, but the coach didn't actually go watch the game. He just now looks at the box score and says, okay, we lost 110 to 89, and I see that your shooting percentage was only 41%, and you were only 32% from three. You must not be running the plays right. All right, so let's go practice the plays some more. And then but without any idea of what they were actually doing in the actual game. Is that
Exactly.
about right?
Exactly. It's like trying to coach a team where you get to show up to one game a month. And for the other games, you don't even get the rest of the box score. All you get is the final score.
Yeah. And, to take this a little bit further, sorry to get bogged down on this, but I just thought of it. So it's kind of interesting. As a basketball fan, I don't know if you're aware of this, Joe, you may be aware of this in basketball specific. I'm sure other sports have similar things. They have stats now that are ridiculously, stupidly granular. So, for instance, they'll have stats on not just a guy, what percentage of his shots are three pointers versus two pointers, and not just what was his percentage on three pointers. They'll have stats on what is his percentage when he dribbles twice before he shoots, when he's got a defender within 3 feet from him versus more than 3 feet away from him, and coming off of picks and from the left side, the top, and the middle. Like it is super granular. And they're using technology to measure all of that in real time. And now they've got feedback and they're like, hey, we need you to come off two picks and get set up here because that's your best shot. We know it from our analytics. It's Moneyball.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. So I think we've established this is an important product, which is why I keep bringing you on here.
Sure.
So,
No.
where do we go in this conversation regarding, implementation of it?
Yeah, yeah. So um what we're seeing is that the way that people coach once they have this tool hasn't caught up to the power of the tool. So I'll give you an example. We thought that managers who could do ride-alongs in 1/20th the time that they used to be able to would do more ride-alongs than they used to. But it turns out they just do the same amount of ride-alongs, way faster, and they spend less time overall coaching. And so this taught us that actually there's a disconnect where managers have only coached when there was a major problem for so long, just that it was so because it was so costly that they think you're only supposed to coach when there's a major problem. And that's just not the case anymore, right? Coaching should be continual, not periodic, because that's what enables people to continuously break through barriers and creates a culture of winning, and builds empires, not just companies that are getting by. So, um, when should people coach? Well, not just to extinguish fires, right? By looking at sales numbers, which are a lagging indicator. By the time those dip too low, when it shows up in the sales numbers, it's sort of already too late. So you have to change the key metrics that you're tracking to some of those leading indicators, those things that you get out of the data. Where are we on 3-point percentage? Where are we on in the paint? How are we, right? These sorts of metrics that you're talking about, those inputs are now the metrics that we need to coach off of.
Okay, so
That,
you just used the phrase leading indicators.
yeah,
What would be examples of some of those leading indicators?
sure. So um, there are the basic ones, and I'm going to talk about how we need to move past the basic ones in a second. But
Okay.
how fast your team is talking, how much are they adhering to the process? If you notice that someone's not adhering to the process today, it's going to take about a week, like some more time to show up in the numbers, in the sales numbers. But if you coach them today, you have a chance at actually preventing, right, the next week of appointments from costing you more money than they should.
Okay, so I just want to make sure everybody's on the same page here because I'm trying to connect these dots. I think this is what you're saying. Tell me if I got it right. You're saying that by using this tool, it's going to perhaps tell me, hey, the AI is going to say to you as a sales leader, hey, we're detecting a problem with people talking too fast. Or to use your other example, not adhering to the process. And I would assume that it would say in these specific ways, not adhering to the process, not just generically not adhering to the process. So what you're saying is great with my quote unquote 20 virtual ride-alongs, I'm aggregating this data. Now I train on this when it starts to go off the rails instead of waiting for the sales results to prove that it's gone off the rails.
Exactly, because by then you already will have missed several sales. And that's the biggest expense a company carries, right? Is a missed sale. And if you track those leading indicators, you're going to be able to action much more quickly. Um, and and you'll find that you can get your reps a lot better than you thought you could.
Okay. So, um, those are the basic ones. You said you were going to talk about some of the more in-depth ones.
Yeah. So the last thing I'll say on this is like since we've been geared towards only coaching once there's a fire, we've accepted a general level of sales performance that like I think is not really that exciting. Like the average, the median rep in home improvement like could be doing so much better, could be making much more life-changing money because what we're doing is not rocket science. But because it's been so costly to try and change the numbers, we've just been conditioned to accept a level of performance that's not inspiring. But it behooves the company and it behooves individuals to continue to coach on those leading indicators until people do reach on average inspiring levels of performance. It just makes so much sense from a business and a people standpoint. So what do you actually coach on then? How does that change, right? So
Hold on. I want to get into the what do you actually coach on? Hold that thought.
yeah,
So, is this what you're saying? Are you saying, let's say that a given organization historically has an average of, let's say, 32% conversion ratio sale in the home. And within that 32% conversion rate, they've got a range within their sales team of, let's say, 26% to 39%. Their best guy is 39%, their worst guy is 26, and they average at 32. Obviously I just made up those numbers. I think what I'm hearing you saying is that whole scale should be shifted. Is that what you're saying?
exactly.
The whole
Exactly.
scale should be shifted. So maybe the guy who's at 39, that should be the average, and the top guy should be doing 50 because we've got the technology to tell us where we're screwing up.
Yep. And a couple of years from now, we'll look back at like the levels of performance that we accept today, and we won't believe that we used to accept those level of performance and call a rep who did who was doing 25% close or 30% close good. Um,
Well, here's
that,
where I see this going. This is my opinion's not the right word. I'm just going to hypothesize. I don't really know if I feel strongly about this, but it feels like we're going to have a shift within the selling business as a whole from haves and to haves and have nots. Like historically, you've had organizations that are bigger and better at sales training, and so their people are going to be on average better. They're going to attract better people, and you've got smaller companies that struggle to keep up with that. But in the future, the people that are not using this technology, they're just going to be flat out screwed. They're not going to survive. Because if you go to 40% conversion ratio on average instead of 30 or 32, those sales are coming from somewhere. They're coming out of somebody else's pocket. And they're coming out of the pocket of the guy who's not using this technology and who went from, let's say your average was 32, let's say their company, not quite as sophisticated, was running 29% average. Well, boom, they start slipping down to 25, 23, 22, 21 because your guys are freaking killing them. And then at some point, they just go out of business because their conversion ratio is too low. They can't sell enough business to keep in business. I see it. I see this happening in the future. Do I have that right or wrong in your opinion?
yeah, I mean it sort of I mean I think you're right. The
It's
impact
like
will
table stakes to show up in the future. Like if you don't do this in the future, you can't even play the game.
yeah. I mean if you just imagine, let's make the numbers simple. Let's say you like 20% of your deals are against a specific competitor in a specific area and you're winning about half the time. all of a sudden, if they double their win rate against you and you go to only winning 25% of the time, then your whole bottom line just decreased by by 5%.
Yeah, we're on the same page here.
Um,
Okay, so
so
I kind of cut you off a minute ago when you were gonna, I said, don't forget that point. I forgot the point. I hope you didn't forget the point.
yes, uh, definitely not. So what do you actually coach on then if it's not the lagging indicators? And when do you coach? Like it should be a very continual process where you're looking at these leading indicators. And you can track adherence to process. That's one of the reasons why, in general, like these bigger companies with more sales training resources can have better sales teams. You can track coach on these speech analytics, and you should coach against process. But I'm seeing that people obsessing with process is holding them back. And one of the things I hear on sales conversations all the time is, hey, we want to track all of our reps' adherence to process, and we don't want our reps to be able to listen to our top guys because they don't follow the process. And and
That seems ass backwards when you say it out loud like that.
exactly. And I was talking to Joe Downey, who's one of the sales executives over at Jacuzzi, and I think his take on this is actually more right, which is that the uh, the reason that the sales reps who are crushing it are not following the process is not because what they're doing is not replicatable, right? Um, it's that they've graduated from the process. And the way to think about the process is it's not to guarantee some ceiling of performance. It's to try and guarantee a floor of performance. But when you're trying to guarantee that floor, you end up unintentionally guaranteeing a ceiling because beyond the process, people need to develop their own music to the lyrics. And as long as they understand what the process is designed to do and they can accomplish those things, whether they use the script word for word or not, they're going to be able to succeed. And in fact, the more they make it their own because they understand it, the better they're going to do. And so the proper way to think about a process is that it's what you're at least going to do to guarantee the floor, but it's only 101, right? It's only the intro class. And the skills and you know the psychological impact that the process is designed to produce should be taught, and the general principles underneath them so that you can go to 201, 301, 401, and continue graduating. I think people need to be more comfortable starting to coach against those skills and the nuances. Um,
Well, it seems to me like the so I'm gonna just weigh in here and maybe
sure.
we'll have a little debate. Who knows? I don't think so. Um, the comment that, hey, we don't want people listening to our top reps because they don't use the process is probably accurate. It's probably true and best because the truth is, if you have somebody who's not mastered the process yet, and they start trying to use these higher level 201, 301 level methodologies or skill sets, they're almost certainly going to misapply them. So it seems like you need your people into two camps. Like you need them in the preparatory camp, and then you need them in the master's camp. And I don't know, there's some overlap in the middle there because obviously you don't just instantly, suddenly become, jump from preparatory to master. But also, the word that I use in this situation, because this thing that you're talking about is replicated in every domain that's important in life.
Yes.
Okay, it's not just sales. And so you've always got this tension between training on the basics versus allowing somebody to go freehand, so to speak. And it seems like if we can get people to a certain level of competence on the process, then we can move them more into a master's type training situation. I don't know. Do you think there's wisdom in separating these folks?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. So the idea, what I'm very specifically trying to target is the idea that because top reps do things that are different, they're not replicatable at all is wrong. They shouldn't be attempted to be replicated by people who haven't even gotten the basics down. You have to learn how to play the cards in poker before you can play the man, right? You have to learn the lyrics before you can add your own music, right? But I absolutely agree with that. So when I was a manager at Cutco, um, I was an absolute process Nazi in the first 10 days, 14 days of a sales rep's career. But once I knew that they could follow the script, we moved on to teaching them some higher level things. To show you just how crazy I was about the script, I literally had all of my reps take out the script on paper in the home with customers and read it to them until they knew it well enough not to need the script. Um, and then once they could do it without the script, then you start teaching them higher level things. Um, and the reason I did that is this is what my manager did for me. The moment that he realized I had mastered the basics, the very next day, he showed me a recording of one of his reps that had the highest average order of all time, like in Cutco history. And we went through it. He watched it with me so that he could explain why some of the things were different and what they're designed to do. And we picked two or three things to implement, and my average order doubled overnight. Before that, I was getting bored. And then after that, I was making twice as much money. And I was excited to continue to develop and become continue to be a leader in the organization, right? So I do think you need to separate and and treat the two different groups differently.
Yeah, to me, this is kind of get a little deep here, but this to me, this is the difference between knowledge and wisdom. My definition of wisdom is, and I just jotted down on my notes here so I get it right, knowing what to do to get the best result given the current conditions. But the problem with the rookie who is not capable of, they're not capable of reading the conditions and knowing what to do. So you have to say, follow this protocol, follow this process, because you're not experienced enough, you're not wise enough to know how to deal with this. It reminds me of a funny story. I'll share this. Again, it's a sports story. This goes back. Unfortunately for me, I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan. But back in the heyday when they were winning Super Bowls in the early 90s with Troy Aikman, Emmitt Smith, Michael Irvin, there was a story about Jimmy Johnson, who was the coach of the Cowboys at the time. They had a backup running back, and he fell asleep during one of the film sessions because, they turn the lights down, they're watching film, making notes, and he fell asleep and he got fired. And it came out publicly that he was fired for falling asleep during the film session. And so the press, of course, is all over this. And they asked Jimmy Johnson, they're like, hey, that seems awfully harsh. What if Emmitt Smith, the main running back, who's a Hall of Famer, what if Emmitt Smith would have fallen asleep in a film session? Would you have cut him? And Jimmy says, if Emmitt Smith fell asleep during a film session, here's what I would do. I would gently nudge him and say, hey, Emmitt, wake up.
Yep. Yeah. And
Conditions, understanding. So getting back to your point then, okay, so we've made this distinction. We've got what we'll call masters. We've got what we'll call preparatory rookies. We've got process on the one side. We've got freestyling on the higher end. What's the point then as it relates to Zero and, conversation intelligence, what you do? So how would I overlay what you're doing on that distinction?
yeah, so if you accept, right, that at a certain point, the process once you've mastered it, actually starts holding you back, like it was for me. I never would have been able to double my average order if I followed the process I was taught. I needed to graduate. If you accept that, then you know it means that once your reps have mastered the process, your job actually gets harder. You go and you look at someone who's mastered the process, they're following the steps, which you can see in the scorecard. They're 245 out of 250 points because we're measuring their adherence to the process. People might think, oh, that person's doing great. I don't need to work with them. That's actually a really, really important time to now help them develop the 201 and the 301 and the 401 skills. Now, one of the problems we've seen is like what is not measured doesn't get managed, right? What's not inspected deteriorates. So we've been able to help people coach against their process better now that we're scoring it. We've been able to help them coach against the speech analytics better now that we're scoring it, but we couldn't get people to actually take action to help get to 201, 301, 401, the skills beyond the basic process because we weren't measuring those skills. And so one of the things that we're launching now within your scorecard is the ability to use AI to score those more nuanced and more important skills that are going to help you take someone from good to great and great to exceptional, not just someone from bad to okay or average acceptable. So,
Do you have any examples of that? If you don't, that would actually be a perfectly acceptable answer because this is very nuanced stuff we're talking about.
yeah, I do. So, um, let's say, we want to talk about, we want to talk about, the market survey, the needs assessment, qualification, right? Everyone calls it different things, but basically, where you try and figure out what the problem is that you're there to solve, right? What we've tracked for people in process is, did you ask all these questions you're supposed to ask, right? How'd you hear about us? How long have you been here? So on and so forth, right? All these
Yep.
questions. That's just whether, you did discovery. It's more interesting to understand how well you did discovery. So the skill here is identifying a compelling reason for the customer to buy. So a compelling reason connects the product to an emotional or meaningful impact on the customer's life rather than just stating facts. So instead of saying, hey, my AC is broken and it's hot, we're looking for, I work from home, it's been miserable without AC, and I'm worried about my mother being in a hot environment. That shows how the broken AC impacts daily life and creates concern for loved ones, making the need more urgent and relatable. So we gave this skill description, identifying a compelling reason for a customer to buy, and we had the AI score thousands and thousands of recordings, and the results are really interesting. So I'll give you a sample. Uh, well, before I give the sample score, I'll pause there. Does that make sense so far, Rich?
It does. Um, okay, keep going. I want to ask you a question, but I'm going to hold it. Keep going on this example.
Sure. So I'll pull up an example score from this, right? So this one got a 65%, the score. Um, the AI observes the rep identified. So this is selling a sunroom. So rep identifies dust control as a key benefit, noting the customer's cleanliness. Hey, you seem like an orderly, clean person. Connected this to emotional impact. You're dusting this place all the time, huh? They tried to understand the intended room use, acknowledge a customer's craftsmanship and attention to detail. Those were the strengths. The weaknesses is they didn't dig deep enough into the emotional impacts of the dust problem. They could have explored the health impacts of constant dust, the time wasted on constant cleaning, the impact on entertaining guests, and the protection of wooden furniture crafted by the customer who really cares about the woodworking that they're doing. Missed an opportunity to connect with the customer's pride in woodworking, failed to create urgency around the problem, focused too much on technical aspects rather than lifestyle benefits, didn't
And
effectively.
let me just pause you right there. Can I assume that you're reading the feedback from the AI right now?
Yes, this is exactly the sample score from the AI, and it's justifying, explaining its score.
Yep,
Why?
got it. I just wanted to clarify that. I think it was obvious, but I just want to make sure it was super obvious. Keep going.
And then, finishes up with didn't effectively paint a picture of life after installation, could have better explored impact on property value given the customer's investment in the workshop. So overall, identified some basic compelling reasons, but didn't develop them fully or connect them deeply enough to emotional drivers. They stayed largely surface level and focused more on technical aspects and price. So 65 overall. Um, Now, that's just one example, right, of a skill that we used to never be able to measure, right? And I think some managers actually aren't even skilled enough from a sales perspective to understand how like what good looks like here, because they weren't good at connecting to emotional drivers of pain. And
Yeah,
it's not.
your best case scenario is that you happen to have a manager that is tuned into that particular thing. And by the way, there's dozens of potential things, but this particular thing, and he happened to be on that sales call with that guy, and he happened to catch it, and he happened to give him the feedback. That's your best case scenario in the past. And now we've got this readout instantaneously saying, here's your score, and here's specific things you could have looked at potentially doing better.
Yep. And that's just one example, right? Now you can also coach on objection handling. You can coach on whether they're using too much jargon in the conversation, whether they're asking great open-ended questions, whether they're closing smoothly, whether they're positioning financing correctly, whether they're constantly tying the product demo back to the emotional needs that have been identified before, right? All these other really nuanced things that you can now measure allow you to move beyond just being a process Nazi to actually coaching people on real sales skills that are going to turn them into killers at scale. And if you don't believe me that this stuff really matters, right? The analysis that we did on just this compelling reason across thousands of reps, um, it explained 15% of their sales productivity. Like just compelling reason to buy, identifying a compelling reason, explain 15%
Hmm.
of uh, of the difference in sales productivity. So, I mean, you can imagine stacking up just a couple of these, and all of a sudden you're really getting into the meat of what matters and how to take people from good to great.
Yeah, like we said, moving that whole scale of closing ratios to the right, higher, totally is in play. It makes sense.
Yep, exactly.
Um, Look, we're getting a little bit short on time here. Before we end, maybe you can give me one or two case study type examples.
Yeah, absolutely. So, basically the idea here, um, we've had a 1,200 rep org, saw a 25% productivity improvement. Um, my favorite example is Great Day Improvements. We did a one of the probably the most statistically sound case study we've ever done, certainly that anyone's in the industry's ever done, where we took half of uh, reps across a couple of different offices, put them on Zero, left the other half off Zero.
So it's like a
Before,
true placebo controlled trial, so to speak.
yeah, that's right. And the yield, the NSLI for the on Zero group was the same before the trial started as the off Zero group. By the time it was over, it was $756 higher. Um,
And what is that? 756 as a percentage.
it was 30 something percent. I forget the exact.
Um, okay. Here's why I'm kind of throwing a flag right now. It's a good flag, don't worry.
Yeah,
Um, do you have this case study written up in detail? Because I would be fascinated to learn about this, or is it more proprietary? Look at your client, and maybe they don't want the details getting out there.
it's a good question. Let me find out exactly what we can share. We learned a ton from it, and we can send that over to you.
And I know a little bit about that organization, not probably as much as you do, but if I'm not mistaken, they've got something like 12 or 13 different brands. and each brand has multiple locations. So was this just within one of the brands, or was it spread across multiple brands?
This was one brand that we started with, and since then
Hmm.
we've expanded, um, across several.
Yeah, I imagine they looked at that and said, "Yeah, let's go."
That's right.
Okay. Well, that's amazing. That's really cool. Go find out more about that case study because honestly, if you're allowed to share that from a privacy standpoint to whatever extent you are, to me that's almost an entire podcast right there. I like let's w walk through that. Let's look at the stats and and then I would also be interested to see what happens as that starts getting spread across multiple other reps in that organization, other brands within that organization. That's just it's really compelling information that you're giving me here.
Yeah,
You're
absolutely.
teasing me with here.
I'm happy to share. Absolutely. We'll get back to you on that stuff for sure.
Okay. Anything else you want to share? This is a great topic. I love this topic. And I said I had a question earlier. I was going to save it. So I'm going to give it to you now. So to me, the obvious temptation here is to now start looking at the advanced techniques and trying to pull them back and make them part of the basic uh, uh, procedure process. Uh, what's your thought on that? Is that the right thing to do? Is that the wrong thing to do? You see what I'm saying?
Yep, absolutely. So you definitely want to go in order. Like you said, there's um, some things that people just aren't ready for yet. Um, and one of the ways that you can enforce that that takes place, right, within your scorecard is by weighting the basic stuff higher because you have full control over how the weights work. So that when you look at your scorecard, you're going to address the stuff first that needs to be addressed first, which is just doing the basics. And then you earn the right to work on the other stuff that's worth less. So that's one of the ways that as an executive, you can make sure your managers are going to go through the right order. And as a manager, you can make sure your reps are going to go through these skills in the right order. Is like make those first ones, those basic ones, worth the most points.
Okay. Well, fascinating stuff as always. If people want to learn more about Zero, go to Zero.ai. Is there any specific thing they should do? Is there a demo they can do? What does that look like?
Yep, absolutely. So head to Zero.ai. You can get a demo with us, figure out if it's the right fit for your team. Either way, we'll make sure that we add value and teach you something new.
I'm going to ask, put your sales hat on for just a second. I'm going to ask you some questions that I'm interested in knowing. Most of the people that you bring on, companies that you bring on, are you bringing them on from not using conversion intelligence, AI, sales coaching like this, or are you bringing them over from a different, let's call it competitive product? What's the typical thing? Because we're kind of still early in this game. I'm going to guess it's the first one.
Um, yeah, I would say it's majority the first one, but it is a mix of both. Um, we have been switching over, customers who were using another tool, but decided that they wanted to come to Zero because they were either having challenges with adoption, accuracy of the analytics, felt like their managers were the only ones using it, and their reps weren't actually taking the time to learn themselves. So those are the common pain points we see that have caused someone to switch from an existing tool. And of course, plenty of people are also switching from nothing to try Zero because of all the
Okay.
problems.
Well, and that's what I really wanted to bring out. It's like, hey, maybe you're using a different tool. Is it worthwhile to even, look you guys up? And I think the answer is definitely yes.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, Joe, as usual, it's been a pleasure. Appreciate your time, and we'll certainly be meeting again later this year. Thank you.
Yeah, sounds great. Thank you, everyone.